Hey guys, Churchy here. So today I want to talk about Starfield. I've been playing it a lot over the last week in the early access. I bought the special edition, got onto that. I've had a pretty damn good time overall. The TLDR of this video would basically be that I've played 50 hours so far, about that, and overall at the moment I'd probably give it like 7 or 8 out of 10. 8 is probably my slightly biased view of just quite enjoying past Bethesda games and enjoying just their kind of the way they do games, sort of. But realistically, 7 or 7.5 out of 10 might be more accurate. I'm going to start by talking about the bad stuff I've encountered, and there is a fair bit of stuff that sort of could do with a bit of work and could be a bit better. But there was also a lot of good. So it's sort of like there's a really solid foundation there, at least. It's like there's a lot of good, a fair bit of bad, but the bad stuff's not super bad, if that makes sense. But yeah, let's just talk about some of the bad stuff to start with. I found the UI to be very console-y, very much designed to be used on console, I would say. It was quite clunky and cumbersome at times with a mouse and keyboard. On top of that, I wish there was more map functionality. You're kind of like diving in and out of layers of the map, and you do that a lot, and that felt a bit awkward. I wish you could sort of search for specific places or outposts or resources or whatever, and like tag different merchants by different type. I think the local planet maps in that regard could be a lot better, because they're just sort of like the zone you're in, whereas it's sort of like you're in this like advanced human race kind of. Like, I feel like they would have local maps that just like download to your data slate or whatever. So that sort of felt a bit odd. And I think you could even have that as like a feature. You could have like, click a thing, download the map, like click a kiosk or whatever and like download the local map or something. And then maybe that showed you like where the shops and different services are for that place. And then maybe there's like extra hidden stuff and secret little things hidden about the place that you can find anyway. That could make it kind of more interesting in that regard, rather than just being like the interesting thing being like finding the shops and stuff. Like, I feel like it's still fun to explore, but mostly you're just like wandering around finding shops and stuff. But yeah, performance was actually pretty iffy. It was kind of up and down a bit, and I think the game's very much built on using upscaling to actually even hit 60 FPS. There was times where I had to actually set my settings to just everything on medium, just to get it to sort of hit 60 FPS. And my system should have like no problems with this game, to be honest. Like, I've got a 3080, I've got 64 gig of RAM, I've got like a a really nice Ryzen AMD processor. I can't remember the specific one now, but basically the point I'm making is that my system should have no worries with this game at all, and runs like all of the newest Butte things at the moment. I play at like 1440p and it runs all of that completely fine, usually. So another problem I had, which was kind of annoying, there's no FOV slider in the game. That was quite annoying, because the default FOV is very narrow and kind of awkward and just makes you feel a bit sick after a while if you try and play with that. So you have to like actually tweak an ini file or like enter in some commands in the command console thing. The usual commands that used to work don't, because they've changed it now to a different command. But yeah, you can just basically put that in your ini files. Like, you need to make a custom file thing. And I also had to turn off mouse acceleration, I think. So there was just a couple of things like that where I'm like, why wasn't this just in the game? I had to like go outside of the game and fuck around to get it to be how I wanted. Kind of annoying. A big thing, which is kind of a fairly large chunk of the game in a way, is the procedural generation stuff. I feel like overall so far that has felt kind of underwhelming. I haven't explored a heap of the different planets, but I've already seen a few different duplicate locations, especially this like listening post thing. I've seen the same exact building with the exact same pirate enemies and the exact same item, well, not items, but the exact same static items and locations and stuff, and the same magazine spawns and stuff, and the same just even the same kind of enemy spawns as well, basically, almost, if not exactly. And then, yeah, it's kind of feels weird because I've seen more duplicates than I've almost not at this point, in the little bit of exploring that I've done in the procedural places. So it's the handcrafted spots that are put in the procedural spots. So yeah, they're sort of handcrafted, but it seems like there's not really a very big pool of them for the game to choose from. And I've seen like duplicate artifact, ruin tower things. Yeah, it doesn't seem to be drawing from a very big pool of options to kind of place out in the procedural generated world space. And the biomes, though some of them are really, really gorgeous, they're kind of fairly limited in their biodiversity and scope and stuff. They'll kind of be like a few different plants, and then maybe like a few others that you can scan. So maybe like 5 or 6 different plants, and then maybe like 3 to 5 different alien creatures. Usually one of those is a predator. So it's all very kind of surface level in that way. It's not like a deep living, breathing world kind of thing. It's kind of just like very shallow kind of implementation in a way is what I would say it kind of feels like. It's still all right and it still does the job and it's still quite beautiful at times, but it's just that it's could do with a lot more depth and a lot more variety. Another thing was that basically it seems like you can only head about 4 kilometers away from your spaceship, wherever that lands. I tested it a couple of times. One time it was only 3.6k that it let me get away from it before it sort of comes up with a pop-up saying like, turn back or whatever, or like, you'll have to go back to your ship to spawn another area basically. And the other one was 4.25k. So I'm not quite sure what determines it. Notably, the planet that had the 4.25k was a bit more barren than the one that had the 3.6. Another thing that I think the procedural stuff might have affected is the environmental storytelling. I feel like from what I've seen so far, this may change later, I don't know, but from what I've seen so far, it doesn't quite seem to be as good as previous games. And maybe the procedural stuff has affected that in a way. There's just less of that story-rich details in the environment where you kind of like find a story hiding in, because it's not handcrafted, it's a lot of it. So, but then there are the handcrafted bits, which are really good, that I'll talk a bit more about later. But even those seem to be very clean environments with not a lot of sort of extra little hidden stories and stuff to find. Like it all seems very clean, if that makes sense. And I think I get the vibe that the procedural kind of nature of some of the stuff may have influenced that. I'll also say that the encounters you seem to have in the procedural areas have all been fairly repetitive for me as well at this point. It's usually just like you encounter some enemies and you kill them. And maybe you clear them from a location or from a ship. And occasionally you might come across like a homesteader base thing, and that's kind of cool sometimes because they'll have like a merchant or something and like a few just people hanging around. So again, it all looks really cool and like it all feels quite nice in that sense of just like exploring and being like, oh, cool, this is neat. But it doesn't go that extra level. It's all just kind of like, yeah, this is kind of neat. Rather than like, wow, I'm completely amazed. Like, yeah, the first few times it's all incredible, but it's very quickly kind of, you're sort of like, oh yeah, this same kind of thing again, this same encounter. And speaking of the clearing the ships, there's a few times where I've cleared out the ship and not been able to pilot it. I've only had it 2 times where I've actually been able to take the ship out of like maybe 5 or 6. I'm assuming it's because I don't have a good enough piloting skill, but I would love if there was like something more interesting if that's the case in the game, because at the moment it seems like if you can't pilot the ship, you just kind of have to leave behind this massive ship and it's just a waste. Like I would love if there was a way to, maybe you could like call in some scrappers or something, and be like, hey, I know where there's a ship that you guys can scrap, pay me for this tip or this lead or whatever, and then maybe you get given like a quarter of the value of the ship or something. Like some kind of extra mechanic like that would be cool, rather than just making it feel really, because it feels really bad when you're like, yeah, I killed these guys, now I get their ship, and you go to pilot and it's like, no, you're not authorized to pilot this. It just feels really like, come on, man, like just let me have the ship or do something with it. But yeah, that's just how I was feeling when I came across it. I also found the gear customization to be a little bit limited. A lot of the systems in the game have been kind of casualized, even more so than Skyrim and stuff. Basically with the gear, you've got like 5 slots. I mean, you've got your weapon, but I mean, talking of like your armor, you've got like your spacesuit slot, and then your kind of like helmet for your space outfit. Then you've got like your settlement outfit / kind of apparel, and that's like 1 slot for the overall outfit, and then like a head slot, and then you can sort of put stuff on your face as well, like an implant or like a face mask or whatever. It's all very, like, that's all very basic. You can customize your gear by like going to a weapon bench or an armor bench, and you research different like tiers of upgrades, and then you need more perks to get more of those upgrades available and stuff, which all makes sense. But some of the elements of gameplay, this is another thing. For something that's casualized as much as it is, and that is kind of, it's quite a relaxed game in my opinion. Like, it's quite casual, it's quite chilled out. But it feels weird because different kind of elements of the gameplay are kind of locked behind getting certain perks, which is sort of fine, but I feel like it might have felt a bit better if you just started with all of the ability to do all these things, but you were just bad at them, rather than having to actually invest the perk point to be able to do some of these things. So what I mean is, like, you have to invest a perk point to be able to use a jetpack. You have to invest a perk point to be able to use your ship's targeting system to like target different parts of an enemy spaceship. I think there's one you have to get that lets you do a combat slide. And I think there's a few later on which might make sense because they're more extreme things that you can do, I think. But some of those basic ones, I feel like should have just been like, let you do it, but a very basic version. And then you just get better and better at that. Because it feels kind of odd. Like, it feels like they're core gameplay elements that have been kind of locked behind a perk. It just feels like a slight disconnect between the way the game kind of flows casually versus like, oh, I can't do this because I need to get the perk. Or, I don't know. I'm just a bit iffy on it. Like, it doesn't quite seem to fit the casual nature of the game, if that makes sense. And speaking of that, the perk tree is quite basic because again, a lot of the systems in the game, I think, have just kind of been casualized even more than past games. So doesn't really seem to have a lot of deep and meaningful kind of choices and differences and stuff. And a lot of the perks you're taking, you're kind of just taking them because you want to get that next bit of gameplay. Like, you want to be good at using the jetpack, you want to be able to unlock all the locks, you want to be able to target enemy ships, you want to have access to the weapon upgrades and armor upgrades, and you want to have access to like the different ship upgrades. So it's kind of like the perk tree stuff is almost like you're not really like building your own special unique character that's good at this and bad at this and whatever. You're more just kind of like leveling up to fulfill the necessary requirements to keep yourself in the game and playing the systems that are in the game. Which, I mean, okay, it's all right. But again, it's very just like not very meaningful, not very interesting. It's just sort of like, yeah, it could be more interesting. I haven't got to the very like deeper tiers of the stuff, so I'm hoping that things get a little bit more interesting on the low, like on the ones you've invested more and more points, because you have to sort of invest 4 points to get to the second tier of stuff, then another 4 points to get to the next tier of stuff in each category. So I'm hoping the categories that are further down, like 12 points in and 16 points in or whatever, I'm hoping that they'll be a little bit more varied and interesting maybe. I do have to also say that I felt quite a bit of a lull in the momentum and the fun of the game from about level 10 to sort of 16. And on top of that, there was also kind of a lack of new weapons and armors and stuff to acquire. The momentum of like fun kind of picked up again once I started doing some more of the main story and stuff and getting into that a little bit more. But and that was kind of from maybe like level 16 to 20 it started to pick up again. But I have to say now I'm like level 24 I think, and the weapon and armor variety still just feels kind of limited, and it feels like a lot of the time I think it might be like a level range thing, maybe once you hit certain levels more different ones unlock. And once you visit more systems and stuff, maybe some of the later on systems in the higher level brackets have more interesting looking gear. But it just feels like you spend a lot of time wearing the same piece of gear that you found like 10 levels ago, because it happened to have a good roll on it. Because they've got like a few unique legendary items and stuff, and you can kind of find them at the end of dungeons. They've implemented it so sometimes there's a chest that you can open basically that has like a chance for a really nice piece of gear pretty much. It's like random legendary stats, kind of like Fallout stats and stuff, different, take 15% less damage from this, or deal 15% more damage to this, or like explosive rounds or whatever, things like that. But yeah, I feel like even now at level 24, a lot of the time I just open up a vendor's inventory, have a bit of a gaze, see if they've got anything, but it's always just the same shit. Like it's all armors that I've seen before and like nothing new and exciting. And because there's nothing new and exciting, it kind of becomes a little bit stale in that regard, because you kind of just feel like you're stagnating a little bit. And then, yeah, another thing which I think is kind of detrimental to this game in a way, and that's just partly because of the setting, but the economy is really basic. It's basically the same thing we've seen before in past Bethesda games. Resetting merchants, they're just kind of on a rotation of like, a few days pass or whatever, and then they've got their money back and you can go and sell stuff to them again. I mean, that it's fine. Again, it's that whole thing of like, yeah, okay, it's cool, it does the job, it's all right. But this is like space stuff. It's like prime territory for having, the whole space freight idea and like export, import, that whole sphere of gameplay. Like you could totally have the ability to like buy stuff cheap in one place and haul it across the galaxies to some other spot and then sell it for a bunch more because they really need it there or something. And then you could totally incorporate an element of, because you can set up the outposts and stuff, and you can set up different like resource gatherers. So you could totally have a thing where you found a planet that has this, that's really rich in this resource, and now you're mining a bunch of that resource, and then you can go and sell it to someone that really needs it, and just like have that whole experience of being like a miner and a hauler and all that could be really interesting. But none of that's there. Like it's just this merchant has 5,000 credits. That's what their pool of money. You can like sell enough stuff to equal that money, and then you have to wait a few days and you come back and they'll have the exact same amount of money. So again, it works, but it's just kind of basic, very like run of the mill, just typical, like no. And as I say, I think part of the reason that I feel like that's detrimental in this setting is because it is a space game, and you do build a big epic spaceship, and you can build a freaking space freighter that can carry heaps and heaps of cargo. So why not like feed into that? Why not build upon that with a more interesting economy? So yeah, I don't know. It just, that's a little bit disappointing to me. And a lot of these bad things, I will talk about modding at the end, but yeah, that's something to keep in mind for modding, because a lot of these things can be tweaked. All right, so now I want to talk about the good stuff. And the list is shorter, but the good stuff is fairly impactful in my opinion. So to start with, Starfield can be quite gorgeous at times, like really damn beautiful. There are moments where you'll just be walking along, whether it's in like one of the beautiful handcrafted cities or even in one of the samey procedural places. There are moments when the light catches just right, and whether it's on like some trees or some rocks or like a building or whatever, or on your ship, there are just moments where you just kind of get like very immersed in it and pulled into it, and you're just like, damn, that looks so cool. And you just really enjoy, or at least I really enjoy those moments, and I really get lost in them. And then building off that, the photo mode is really fun, because I'll have those moments and I'll just be like, oh, this would be a great photo. I might just grab a quick photo of this. So I've been enjoying that whole aspect of it, just kind of documenting my journey, because I love photography and all that anyway, so and like filmmaking and all that, so it's a very good fit for me in that regard. The combat, there are a few times where it's a bit floaty and a bit iffy, but overall, for the most part, it does feel pretty damn solid, and it feels like pretty damn fun as well. Another thing that adds to that greatly, I think, is the jetpack. There are just some awesome shootouts that you'll have. There is great moments where you're like, just launch yourself into battle, shoot someone over here, or maybe you like open with a stealthy shot, and then they know you're there, so then you like jetpack around a corner and like come from another angle and take out someone, and then you might like run along and duck behind some crates or something, and then launch back into the air. And it's yeah, it's just this great kind of flow to the battles, I guess, some of the time when it really clicks. Other times it's fairly straightforward and you're just like bam, 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 bam. But yeah, overall the combat has felt pretty damn nice. Probably some of the best I've seen in a Bethesda game. So speaking of jetpacks, I think the jetpack is great. There's a few different versions of them that you can play around with and stuff that kind of behave slightly differently, but all of that's been really cool. I mostly have been using a balanced one. I found that to be quite fun. The power one's interesting too because you can launch really high. But I feel like, yeah, the jetpack gameplay, it almost feels like a requirement in my mind. Like it's just integrated so well and feels so good, and then opens up so many opportunities for you to explore and kind of get to places in the cities that you might not normally get to. So that whole part of it is really cool. Like I've had a ton of fun just launching around with the jetpack, and I'm so glad it was one of the things that I leveled up first. So admittedly I only needed one level of it, but still. The story so far has been pretty cool, pretty decent. At the very least, all right, depending on your kind of opinions. I've been kind of enjoying it quite a bit, and then I think what I've been enjoying is that when I do go and do the main story stuff, I often find myself in the like more handcrafted areas and cities and stuff, and I'm engaging with the characters that are more fleshed out. So that whole side of it just does a really good job of kind of pulling you into the world, I feel like. It just kind of, again, it just immerses you in the setting and everything. And then you have those moments where you are just fully engaged with what you're doing, and you're just like, yep, I'm doing this mission with this character, and we're here, we're doing this. And it's like, I don't want to really talk too much about the specifics of the story and that, but it's just, yeah, it's been pretty cool so far. And I feel like it's just like keeps ramping up and getting a little bit cooler. And speaking of those handcrafted places, another big thing is that it's quite fun to explore the cities. The other locations like space stations and the planets, yeah, they're pretty fun sometimes too. Even the procedural planet stuff, it's still quite entertaining at times if you're in a particular mood, I guess. Again, it's like, it's okay. But the cities and all the handcrafted stuff is, in my opinion, where the game really, really shines. And the whole, just the whole experience of the game kind of amps up a bit, I feel like, because it is all handcrafted, and it really, like, that's where the game does the best job of pulling you into what you're doing and making you feel engaged with what's going on around you and making you feel like you're inside this world, / universe. And yeah, there's just some really cool locations, and some of them are just really damn gorgeous and really interesting to like wander around in. And I think that's something that the game does well. Like, even though a lot of the individual systems and stuff are on that tier where you're kind of like, it's okay, it's all right, could be better, could be worse. I think when the package combines and you kind of like are running around just immersing yourself in, like, picking up random quest lines and doing little missions and stories and stuff and just roaming about, exploring and stuff, that's where, when you get immersed in that, that's when the game feels really, really damn good. Like, you pick up a random quest on a planet, do a couple of odd jobs on the planet, like in one of the cities, and then maybe you like bring some goods to another city because you need to like go back to that place, and then you like decide to mine some resources to build out your outpost a little bit or something, and then you're off doing a bit of a main story mission, and then you head back to some other planet because you liked the look of a shipyard part that they had there that wasn't on another planet. Yeah, it's just basically the playground, the actual playground of the game, and mucking around and just playing in the playground. That whole aspect of it feels really good. And it's easy to just get lost in and spend hours just messing about, basically. And yeah, speaking of the ship stuff and shipyards and everything, the shipbuilding has actually been really cool. I haven't really done much space combat or anything, so I can't really talk to that too much. I just seem to get annihilated every time I try, because my ship I haven't really built around fighting. It's more just like a explorer cargo vessel sort of. But But the shipbuilding itself, that I can talk about. I have not wasted. I've enjoyed, at least a couple of hours at this point, if not more, just mucking around, like building out my ship, modifying my ship, playing around with different parts and different, like, just different cargo holds and stuff, and seeing what new parts I can get. That whole element of like building out your first ship, like customizing your first ship and making the ship you want to make and then building upon that, that's been amazing. Like that, the shipbuilding, I feel like they've nailed it, and it's such a solid system, and I feel like it has great potential to be expanded upon easily by modders. So yeah, that excites me a lot. So yeah, that's kind of my list for the good things. And yes, it's short, but as I say, like when everything comes together and it combines, and when the worst thing that you can think of, you're just kind of like, it's okay. But then those moments where it's at its best, you're just like, oh man, I'm fully immersed in what I'm doing and I'm loving every minute of it. And I've been doing this for like 4 hours straight. That's the kind of game it is. It just, sometimes it really pulls you in. When it's good and it's working, it's like, whew, damn. So I did also want to just share a couple of other little thoughts that I kind of had, not necessarily good or bad, just general kind of thoughts and conclusions. So one point I wanted to make is that I think the game might have benefited from, instead of having just dozens of, solar systems to go to, I feel like maybe it would have benefited from focusing on like maybe 2 to 5 solar systems and just flesh those out with more handcrafted content, because the procedural stuff is okay and it can be kind of relaxing and nice to just do a bit of mining and just kind of enjoy the lighting and everything. Overall, those areas are fairly simplistic and repetitive. And as I mentioned, it was during all the handcrafted kind of stories and while exploring the more handcrafted locations that I was most engaged with the game. So I think if there was more of that in a more condensed universe, it would probably have been better. The other element of that is that a lot of the times the different worlds will have like one city that's like the main hub, and then maybe like one other handcrafted area, 2 if you're lucky, and that'll be like a minor area, like a warehouse or a mining operation or something. And then the rest is just you land on the planet and it generates an area and puts a few handcrafted dots into it. So that also feels a bit weird because feels odd that, like, just lore wise, it feels weird that people settled in like one city on a planet and then you just don't get to go to any other real proper settlements on the same planet, sort of. It's just like, hey, if you want to go to another big settlement, it's in another galaxy or whatever. So rather than like it feels weird that the population is so spread out rather than being like, hey, we colonized this planet, so we've got like 4 or 5 different settlements on the one planet, and then we colonize this planet like this other planet 1 solar system over or whatever. Like it's very much like, here's the main hub city on this planet in this galaxy. Now you go to another galaxy and it's got 1 city and like 1 small settlement or something. Like it's weirdly spread out. Just even thinking from a purely like realistic point of view, I guess. And I guess one minor point on that too was that there's some quests, or at least one quest that stuck out, was when a guy told me to like, I'm pretty sure he was some dude on a space station and he wanted me to put like propaganda posters up, but he wanted me to put them up in like, it just felt like a weird disconnect because a real person, I don't think, even if you have the grav drives and everything and you can really quickly get to another location, he basically wanted me to put up propaganda posters on a city in another freaking solar system, like in another galaxy, I'm pretty sure it was. There's a few little moments like that where it's like, it's kind of like the story writing forgets that it's in space, and forgets that there is like light years and light years and light years between these people and what's going on. And like, yeah, you have the grav drives and you can jump and be there like really quickly and all that. But I still don't think it would kind of be like me telling someone, because I'm in Australia, right? It would be kind of like me telling someone in like Russia or China or something, or like America or Africa or whatever. It would be like me saying, hey, can you, in your local city, can you hang a few posters for me that say some propaganda about this thing that I care about back over here? About, yeah, we're still like the same nation in this, like, and we're still, but yeah, just little moments like that. There's a couple of weird disconnects like that, but that's just rambling about story at that point and whatever. There's just a few weird oddities like that, which again, to tie it back into what I was talking about, I think that's why the game might have benefited from a smaller scope, like 5 solar systems, let's say, and 30 to 50 planets instead of like, and that's including the procedural stuff, like limit it to those and then sculpt out more handcrafted stuff where you can and have like 3 or 5 settlements per big major planet. But yeah, so that's just my thoughts on that. But ultimately I would say like it's a fun, relaxing RPG adventure. It's easy to get lost in. I think I'm going to get a lot of value out of it. And I probably will play for hundreds of hours. At least probably 100 on my first playthrough, I reckon. And then once modding gets in full swing, that's when I'm just going to probably lose many, many hundreds of hours. And I think that's the last thing I want to talk about and close out with is that the game has huge modding potential, which excites me a lot. There's a lot of systems in Starfield that are a good foundation. They're solid. They're okay. They're entertaining enough. They could be a lot better and a lot more in-depth and interesting. And that's where I think if they release the good modding tools and the creation kit stuff is all really, really good and up to scruff, then I think there's the potential there to see some really incredible mods start to come out. And I really hope that they do the modding right and do give us all the tools and stuff that will be needed, because I will be very excited to see where this game is in like 6 months, in a year, in 2 years. And on top of that as well, with like different DLCs they'll release, because I think that combination of all the extra DLCs and all the really awesome mods have the potential to make this game just incredible, to be honest. The foundation is there. And as I said, right now for me personally, I would give it 8 out of 10, but I am a little bit biased towards these Bethesda style games. These, you know, it's basically like Skyrim or Fallout in space, at its very, very root, or core. So yeah, and I'm a little biased towards that. I've loved Bethesda games for years and years and years. So, but yeah, as I say, maybe like a 7 or 7.5, kind of trying to remove that bias. But huge potential with mods. So hopefully all the modding stuff, it just goes nuts. I cannot wait to see how that all kind of unfolds. But yeah, that's it for this video. So thank you for watching. Thank you to the legends supporting me on Patreon. Could not be doing this sort of thing without you guys, and I do really appreciate the support. Have a good day or night, whichever it may be, and I'll see you guys in the next video. I'm going to go play more Starfield. Peace, guys. My voice is so dead.